Hey people, welcome back to the channel. This is a story in which Naruto meets Kurama in the land of waves and they have a mutual friendship. In this story Naruto shifts toward his mother's side as a Uzumaki seal master. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video. Leave a comment if you want to suggest fanfic. Check the description for credits and support the creator of the story. So let us begin. Chapter 38. Aftermath. The three remaining members of the Sound Four looked on in absolute terror as the blonde idiot that was once kneeling in front of them was suddenly replaced by this dome of blood-red demonic chakra. The killing intent that was radiating towards them was more than they had ever encountered before, stronger than even Orochimaru himself. Whoa, what is this? Asked Naruto, taking in the new chakra cloak that surrounded him. This is the four-tailed cloak. We don't have much time, so just listen to me and do what I tell you, said Kurama. A hand shot out of the dome, pinning Yuya to a tree as one of the claws buried itself into her throat, killing her. Kidomaru looked on desperately as he knocked another arrow into his bow and took aim. Maximum power. 150% accuracy, he called out before unleashing the arrow on the miniature Kyuubi that had just emerged from the dome along with the claw. The arrow was heading straight towards Naruto and he made no attempt to move as Kurama just told him to stay still and take the arrow. Naruto took the arrow as it hit him in the chest, shattering and causing Kidomaru to look on with a mixture of shock and terror as his attack did nothing. Kurama got a good laugh at the Spider-Man's expression. Alright kid, follow real close here. We are going to do something that's going to blow these freaks off the map. With that, Naruto raised his head and the four tails formed a sort of semi-circle just a little above his mouth. Balls of red and blue chakra began to form just above the mouth and within this semi-circle as they all converged into a solid sphere of dense chakra. Shit. What the hell is that? Swore Sakin. The two remaining Sound could feel the energy radiating from that ball. This was going to be bad. Sakin began going through a series of hand seals, as they figured this attack was going to be hard to avoid. The sphere finished forming and Naruto proceeded to swallow it as he himself inflated into what looked like a balloon with four tails sticking out of it. And then, Naruto unleashed the attack on the Sound. Summoning Jutsu. Rashomon, shouted Sakin, summoning a giant gate in the wake of Naruto's attack, a desperate attempt to shield him. Kurama just smiled as the ball of chakra at the forefront of the attack made contact with the gate, blowing the doors off its hinges and catching Sakin and Kidomaru in its blast. The Sound Four were now dead. As soon as he felt their presence disappear, Kurama recalled the four-tailed cloak, wanting to save as much time as he could to try and save Sasuke. Naruto was left with the one-tailed cloak when he made his way over to Sasuke. What Kurama had told him was correct. Sasuke was alive and there was a faint pulse. The arrow must have missed the herd by a mere millimeter because Naruto thought he could even see the faint beating of Sasuke's heart in that hole. Unfortunately, he could see blood pouring out of the hole, and a lot of it. Shit. He's bleeding badly. What do I do? Asked Naruto. Move your tail over his wound and carefully flow the chakra into his wound. I'll be helping a bit, but you need to keep yourself from pushing too much in. As Kurama instructed, Naruto moved the remaining chakra tail he had over Sasuke's wound and began channeling chakra into it. Like the demon chakra did to his own wound, Sasuke's began closing. It wasn't fast, but the bleeding was slowing and Naruto could begin to make out some flesh that was beginning to regenerate around some of the more vital parts that were once visible in the wound. However, the healing halted as Naruto used up all the remaining demon chakra he had available to him. That will keep him alive, but he needs medical treatment immediately. There is still a great chance he could die. As for the girl, her wounds aren't as severe but they need attention as well. What do I do then? Konoha is at least a day away if I hurry. They won't last that long, said Naruto. Just hold tight, Kit. I can sense a familiar presence closing in on us. He should be here just about now. Naruto looked up to see what Kurama was talking about. Arrow Sennin. He shouted as Jiraiya emerged from the bush and the fox cloak disappeared. Naruto, thank Kami you're still ally. Watch out, shouted Jiraiya as he jumped in the way of a kick aimed for Naruto. The kick was strong enough it sent Jiraiya crashing into pile of trees, creating a rather large hole. Shibi. What the hell? Shouted Naruto as Shibi emerged on scene, kicking Jiraiya out of the way. I must say I'm impressed you have that much control over the Kyuubi, Naruto. But it seems even you have your limits. Now I'll be taking Sasuke and you'll die, just like the pathetic trash you just killed, hissed Shibi in a familiar voice. You, said Naruto, staring at Shibi. Suddenly, their attention was captured by voices coming out of the hole in the trees that was created by Jiraiya. Geez Jiraiya boy. Why did you have to summon us here? Said an old raspy voice coming from the hole. And right in the middle of dinner too, said another voice. This one sounded more like an older woman. I apologize for summoning you two like this. But my opponent is Orochimaru, so please lend me your help, said a voice that was most definitely Jiraiya's. You really need to learn Sage Mode on your own, Jiraiya boy, said the raspy voice. I wish I could, but I'm still just a tadpole compared to the two of you, said Jiraiya as he emerged from the hole in the trees with two smaller toads mounted on his shoulder. The first one was a green toad with a gray tuft of hair on his head. He wore a dark gray cloak. The second was a lighter green toad with bushy purple hair, purple lipstick, and a light purple blush to her cheeks. Jiraiya himself had changed as well. The markings on his face were different and his eyes were more toad-like. Not to mention his nose grew and he gained some warts. Fukasaku, Shima, will you help me? The two toads nodded. Whoa. Is that really pervy Sage? Said Naruto, trying to do everything to keep himself awake. His body was tired from using the four-tailed cloak like that and he was on the verge of collapsing. Naruto, stay out of this. Today I'm going to put an end to Orochimaru, declared Jiraiya. Orochimaru laughed, ripping off Shibi's face to reveal his own. Well Jiraiya, you really must be desperate if you're relying on the help of two old washed-up toads. Jiraiya didn't want to waste any time talking as he charged towards Orochimaru with an increased speed, taking a good shot at the snake which he dodged, or did he? The fist missed but Orochimaru was sent flying back nonetheless. Orochimaru quickly recovered, brushing off the Sage Chakra-enhanced punch like it was nothing. His borrowed body allowing him to take a much more intense beating. Orochimaru lashed out with some snakes from his hands, only to have them lassoed by Shima's tongue. Pa, now! Indicated Jiraiya as Shima slammed Orochimaru back into a tree. Senpo. Gomon. The three sages shot out a combination of flame wind and earth at Orochimaru as they merged into a wave of molten mud. Summoning jutsu, shouted Orochimaru just in time for a large snake to appear and coil around him. When the attack subsided, Orochimaru emerged unharmed from the charred remains of the serpent surrounding him and Orochimaru sending Jiraiya a look of severe annoyance. Jiraiya knew beforehand that Orochimaru would find a way to avoid that attack, so as soon as the attack was done, he charged at the snake Sannin with a Rasengan in hand. Orochimaru drew his sword of Kusangi from within himself and used it to block Jiraiya's attack, the legendary sword being enough to stop the Rasengan. Once Jiraiya's attack had stopped, Orochimaru swung at the Toad Sage with his blade, just barely nicking Jiraiya in the neck. Jiraiya took a few steps back, creating some distance between he and the snake. Ninpu. Needle hell, shouted Jiraiya as his long hair shot countless needles at Orochimaru. He slithered his way around most of the needles, but found that there were too many to avoid and took a couple dozen needles to the face, torso, and everywhere else. It looked as if Jiraiya had gotten Orochimaru, until he emerged from the mouth of himself. Orochimaru was now unharmed as an old molted body of his lay at his feet. Then Orochimaru bent down to the ground, unleashing a wave of thousands of snakes that went slithering towards the Toad Sages. Senpo. Gomon, shouted Jiraiya as he, Fukasaku, and Shima unleashed their combined attack at the horde of attacking snake. The combined attack incinerated or buried all of the snakes. Kukuku, laughed Orochimaru from behind Jiraiya. He was standing between Jiraiya and where Naruto and Sasuke were. Jiraiya looked at his former teammate. This battle couldn't go on much longer as he was running low on Sage Chakra. He only had enough for maybe 1 or 2 attacks. I don't know Jiraiya, perhaps the Uchiha won't be the only one I take. You never know, perhaps I could find a way to turn that little brat of yours against the village, perhaps even unleash the Kyuubi on it. He seems to have good control over the beast, said Orochimaru. I wonder how the demon's chakra will react to the curse mark. Naruto could barely manage to growl at Orochimaru. Don't even think I'm going to let you near Naruto, let alone Sasuke. Ga! Shouted Jiraiya as the sword of Kusanagi came up from behind and pierced Jiraiya through the chest. To Orochimaru's surprise, Jiraiya disappeared in a puff of smoke, revealing it to be nothing more than a shadow clone. Orochimaru barely had time to react as he felt Jiraiya coming from behind him. Go to hell, you snake. Senpo. Ultra Big Ball Rasengan, shouted Jiraiya as he drove a giant Rasengan into Orochimaru's arms which he had brought up to block the incoming attack. However, he never expected this. Orochimaru cried out in pain as the Rasengan shredded his arms until there was nothing left below the shoulders. Orochimaru collapsed in pain as he began to sink into the ground. Damn you Jiraiya. Don't think for an instant that you've won. I'll be back and I'll get my hands on the treasured Sharingan. And once I do, you can kiss the Leaf Village goodbye. Jiraiya tried to make another attack to try and finish Orochimaru off, but the snake managed to escape into the ground before that ever happened. The battle was over and once again, Orochimaru's plan to get a hold of a certain Uchiha had failed. Fukasaku and Shima returned back to Mount Myoboku as Jiraiya's sage mode ended. Now all that was left to do was to get the slowly dying Sasuke and Sakura back to the village for medical treatment. From the looks of their injuries, it would be close and there was no guarantee of saving them if they got back to Konoha. Both Sakura and Sasuke's injuries were extensive and they had lost a lot of blood already, not to mention there was no sign of Haku. Ero Sennin, said Naruto, growing ever wearier from the exhaustion of the battle. Don't worry Naruto, we'll do what we can. If we can get back to Konoha, Tsunade will see that they are okay, said Jiraiya as Naruto finally lost consciousness. Tsunade waited at the gate for the return of Team 7 and the recovery team. She had gotten a report from them just a few hours prior, stating the severity of Sakura's and Sasuke's injuries and immediately had the prepped. It wasn't much longer before she saw the medics carrying stretchers bearing Sakura and Sasuke. They had a few life support seals on them, but surgery was required immediately. Where are Uzumaki and Yuki? Asked Suon, concerned for the rest of the team. Shizune answered. Uzumaki and Yuki are on their way back but their injuries are not life-threatening. As such, we felt it more dire to rush Haruno and Uchiha back to the village as quick as possible. Medical ninjas were trained to be able to move at incredible speeds in situations like this, faster than was possible for most Jonin. Good. Get them in surgery stat. We need to hurry, ordered Tsunade. Shizune and the remaining medics rushed the two dying members of Team 7 to the hospital. Sakura and Sasuke had been placed in separate operating rooms with vast seal matrices that covered the entire room. With Tsunade overseeing Sasuke and Shizune overseeing Sakura, the operation was going on 20 hours now as they attempted to close the holes in the two genin. Outside one of the operating rooms sat Kazashi and Mebuki Haruno, Sakura's father and mother. They had been there for the past 20 hours, worrying for their daughter's life. Joining them was Ino and her team along with Lee. A few minutes later, the light to the room went off, indicating that the operation was over. By the time she had arrived at the hospital, Sakura had lost almost 40% of her blood. At the same time, she had a gaping hole in her shoulder that had torn flesh and pierced bone. Not to mention her entire left arm had been shattered and the state of her left side was questionable. After further analyzing the situation, it appeared as if 6 of her ribs on the left side alone had been broken with 2 of them piercing her lung. Another 2 ribs had broken on her right side. With everything at hand, the doctors estimated her chance of survival to be 50% at most. Finally, after what felt like hours since the light went off, it had only been 5 to 10 minutes in reality, Shizune emerged, carting Sakura on a hospital gurney. Is she? Asked Mebuki, stopping Shizune and taking a look at her daughter. Shizune gave them a reassuring smile. There were some points where we weren't sure she was going to make it, but everything came out all right. I think she'll make a full recovery, but we are going to have to keep her sedated for at least the next week while her injuries heal. Everyone let out a sigh of relief and Mebuki and Kazashi began thanking whichever kami had allowed for their daughter to live. Despite Sakura's extensive injuries, she was not the worst of the two. Sasuke, while he had fewer injuries as the sound had not actually been trying to kill him, his were more dire. The arrow had just barely missed his heart and clipped a few major organs and arteries in the process. Just from that one injury alone, he had lost around 45% of his blood before being rushed to the ER. 40% is about the most amount of blood a person can afford to lose before their body begins to shut down. His chances of survival were around 40%, but they could have been worse. This is what really caught Tsunade's attention. Sasuke's injuries were serious and would have taken an expert to heal. However, the medics reported that someone had done a small patch job on Sasuke's injury. It wasn't much, but it was enough to stop most of the major bleeding and ensure he would live until they got him to the hospital. Even Jiraiya mentioned that Sasuke had been patched up before he or Orochimaru arrived. This only meant two people could have possibly healed him, Naruto or Sakura. Sakura, while Kakashi had begun to steer her in the direction of medical jutsu, was still barely skilled enough to provide the most basic form of first aid, let alone heal a wound this severe. Naruto on the other hand, he knew no medical ninjutsu. The only reason he could heal himself was the Kyuubi. Wait, that had to be it. The Kyuubi had to have been the one responsible for healing Sasuke. Unfortunately Naruto was still asleep and she wouldn't be able to find out until H was awake. Despite the contract, she had been doubting whether or not the Kyuubi was really good or not, but if he willingly helped Sasuke, was it really just a misunderstanding? Had the village been wrong about the Kyuubi and he wasn't the monster that everyone saw him as? Haku, unlike Sakura and Sasuke, was in no immediate danger when he came in. The worst of his injuries was a broken arm and a puncture wound on his cheek that thankfully wasn't deep enough to reach anything vital, such as the brain. Flashback. Haku focused as much chakra as possible as he could into his jutsu as Kimimaro struck at Haku's head with his bone spear. It looked as if Kimimaro was going to win when his spear reached the ice user's skin. It was at this point that Haku finally got his burst of chakra, taking just about everything he had and pumping it into this new jutsu that he and Zabuza had been working on for the past few months. Within a millisecond, Kimimaro froze, bond spear and all, and his attack stopped just as the spear dug a few centimeters into Haku's cheek. Any later and Kimimaro would have won, reaching Haku's brain with the attack. Haku began to breathe again for what felt like the first time in minute as he carefully removed himself from the frozen dinosaur. He then braced himself as he heard cracks coming from Kimimaro, hoping that the dinosaur had not found a way to break free. Thankfully, Kimimaro toppled forward and slammed into the ground, shattering himself into thousands of pieces. Haku had won as he himself collapsed from exhaustion. Minutes later, just after the blast of demonic chakra was felt, the recovery team arrived on scene with Zabuza looking as worried as ever, even crying. Kakashi was going to have fun with this later. End flashback. Out of all four of them, Naruto was in the best condition, just suffering from a major case of chakra exhaustion. Then again, the other members didn't have a 1,000-year-old demon inside of them that made him heal just about any injury overnight, or almost instantly when he was using more Fox chakra. It had been 3 days since the recovery team arrived back in Konoha and they had all been admitted to the hospital. 3 days since Naruto had been awake. It was finally around this time that Naruto began to stir. When he was finally beginning to come to, he felt a weight on his chest. Someone had restrained him while he was asleep, afraid that he would get out. Thankfully, the restraint was an actual body and not shackles or straps or anything. How long has she been here? Thought Naruto. Just moving his head, he looked around the hospital room. It was his usual room, which was a good thing, and there was a table with a few flowers on it next to him, along with a few cards from Kakashi, Iruka, Konohamaru, Jiraiya, Tsunade, Shizune, the Konoha 13 with the exception of Sasuke, Sakura, and Haku, who were also in the hospital, Hiyashi and a few members of the Hyuga clan who actually liked him, Teuchi and Ayame, and even the owners of the Flaming Leaf Inn. And then there was this lump of lavender love draped across him. It was roughly 3 in the morning and Hinata must have fallen asleep. In fact, it was a surprise that she had actually been allowed to stay this late as the nurses, if not Tsunade herself, threw everyone out after visiting hours. Naruto began to stir and his caught Hinata's attention as she came to as well. And Naruto, she said quietly as she began to notice movement. She turned her head to see if Naruto was actually awake, and to her slight surprise, he was. Before Naruto could fully register what was happening, he was faced with another medical emergency, suffocation, as Hinata wrapped her arms tightly around him, afraid he was going to leave and not come back at all this time. She had seen the medics rush Sasuke and Sakura into the hospital. Those had to be the worst hours of her life, the time between seeing them in such critical condition and when Jiraiya came carrying an unconscious, but alive Naruto. Since then, she was practically at the hospital 24/7 hoping that Naruto would wake soon. Hinata, can't breath, said Naruto as Hinata realized what she was doing and quickly loosened her grip on her blonde boyfriend. Naruto gave her a quick smile after regaining his breath, and Hinata practically pounced him again, this time locking her lips against his. It took Naruto a few minutes to register what was really happening, and for the question he had to know the answer to come to his head. Pulling back from Hinata, he asked. Hinata, Sakura, Sasuke, Haku. Are they? He asked. Hinata gave him a reassuring smile. Haku is fine, just asleep like you were. Suan-sama said there were times when she thought Sakura and Sasuke weren't going to make it, but thankfully, they're expected to fully recover, she said. Naruto let out a big sigh of relief. Then the next problem caught his attention as his stomach began growling. Both of them couldn't help but laugh until Naruto got out of bed, much to Hinata's protest. Naruto reassured her that he wasn't going anywhere as he climbed up onto a counter in the corner of the room and removed one of the ceiling tiles, pulling a container of instant ramen out of the ceiling. Hinata just stood at him wide-eyed, or rather the magic ceiling. Please don't tell anyone. I can't live on just hospital food. It tastes like crap, begged Naruto. Hinata told him not to worry as she found it funny that he had actually managed to hide a ramen stash in the hospital. Naruto went over to the sink. Thankfully, the tap water in the hospital could get hot enough for instant ramen if he just waited a few minutes. Afterwards, he made his way back to the bed, climbed in, making room for Hinata, and finished his ramen while telling Hinata the story of what happened. Jiraiya and Tsunade were in the Hokage's office as Jiraiya had managed to pick up a bottle of sake. This job was supposed to cure Tsunade of her alcoholism, yet it only seemed to be nurturing it. She then heard a knock on the door as Kaharu and Homaru entered the door, just great. On the bright side, Danzo isn't here. Tsunade, we need to talk about the recent events regarding Orochimaru and the Sasuke, said Kaharu. It was at this time that Kakashi appeared in the window. Geez, don't you guys ever use the door? She said, looking at Jiraiya and Kakashi. Both just smiled at her. It's become clear that Sasuke's going to be constantly targeted by Orochimaru, said Homaru. He needs training. He needs to become stronger. Konoha needs the Uchiha clan and we cannot afford to let him die, let alone fall into Orochimaru's hands. Tsunade sighed. Sadly, there were parts of that she agreed with. We suggest you have Jiraiya take Sasuke on as a student and train him personally, suggested Kaharu. No. I won't be taking Sasuke. Besides, I've already a student, said Jiraiya. You can't be talking about Naruto, objected Homaru. Jiraiya just nodded. But why? You'd rather take that demon over Uchiha-sama. Kaharu felt a massive amount of killing intent directed towards him from Kakashi, Tsunade, but especially Jiraiya. Don't you ever refer to Naruto as demon again, threatened Jiraiya. Just know that if it wasn't for that demon, Sasuke probably wouldn't be alive, said Tsunade. What are you talking about? Asked Kaharu. Before I go any further, just know that what I'm about to say will be considered an S-class secret, punishable by death, said Tsunade. Everyone in the room nodded. Good, now if you'll make a blood oath to seal the deal. Homaru and Kaharu questioned this decision, but it was obvious Tsunade didn't quite trust these two and as such she was requiring them to make a blood oath, not to mention this to anyone without the Hokage's permission or else they would drop over dead on spot. The two elders sighed as they made the blood oath, their curiosity taking over. When I arrived at the scene of the battle, 3 sound ninja that Orochimaru had sent to abduct Sasuke were practically obliterated. We were able to retrieve the body of a young girl and it looked as if a claw had been driven through her neck, nearly decapitating her. Also, there was a huge crater in the forest where we recovered the head of another sound ninja. His body was nowhere to be found and we are certain it is no longer in existence, explained Jiraiya. Furthermore, when I went to check on Sasuke after battling with Orochimaru, it appeared as if some medical jutsu had already been performed on him to stop most of the bleeding. I believe you've already been briefed on the injury Sasuke sustained. Then Orochimaru had to have done something to save Sasuke. After all, he seems to want Sasuke alive, said Kaharu. No. Sasuke was healed before Orochimaru arrived and Sakura was too injured to even be conscious at the time, said Jiraiya. Tsunade then interrupted. The area where Sasuke was injured is an incredibly complex and vital area. Even if the sound ninja missed his heart, they has left a gaping hole in his right lung and severed many of the arteries in the area. Even I would have been hard-pressed to heal that injury. With everything given, Sasuke should have been dead. There was only one being that could have saved Sasuke, said Tsunade. Wait, you're not saying the Kyuubi saved Sasuke, said Kaharu. I am. Naruto doesn't have any medical knowledge so the Kyuubi must have at least instructed him how to patch up Sasuke, said Tsunade. But then that means the Kyuubi must be trying to gain control over Naruto. We must act before it can escape, worried Homaru. No, shouted Jiraiya. So what? You just expect us to wait while the Kyuubi breaks free, said Homaru. This is why I'm taking Naruto as my apprentice. If anyone in the village can teach him how to harness the Kyuubi's power, it's me, said Jiraiya. I'm the one who best knows my late apprentice's seal and I'm the only one who can stop the Kyuubi if it tried to escape. Like he would actually try. It seems as if he's become too fond of Naruto to even attempt something like escaping. Not to mention, there is the contract between the two of them, but they don't need to know about that yet. But why Naruto? It's not Naruto who needs the training, but Sasuke, protested Kaharu. Sadly, that's where you're wrong. My spy network has discovered a group of S-class criminals named Akatsuki and I am sure they will be coming after Naruto. They are after the tailed beasts after all, said Jiraiya. Naruto is in just as much danger as Sasuke and I will not allow him to be neglected like he has for the past 12 years. What are you saying? That we've merely tossed Naruto aside? Asked Homaru. Yes. Ever since he was cast out of the orphanage at age 4, Naruto has had to fend for himself with the villagers not even offering the slightest bit of help. In fact, they've merely tossed him out on the street, abused him, and even tried to kill him for no goddamn reason. Jiraiya was beginning to get really worked up. He took a few breaths, calming himself. I'll be taking Naruto away from the village for a few years to train him once I've wrapped up things in Konoha. There is nothing that you can say or do that will make me change my mind. Naruto is my apprentice and that is final. But regardless of Naruto, what will we do about Sasuke? We cannot allow him to fall into Orochimaru's hands. We were lucky this time, but surely Orochimaru will be back, said a worried Kaharu. It was then that Kakashi spoke up. We've already discussed that and I've decided that I would be willing to take Sasuke as a personal apprentice of mine, said the one-eyed Jonin. But first, we need to figure out what to do with Sakura. I don't want to simply abandon her. With Haku, he is pretty much trained personally by Zabuza when he has the time. So Haku is not in need of a private mentor. Given that he is the only other one in the village with the Sharingan, Kakashi is the best person for teaching Sasuke, said Jiraiya. Very well, scowled Kaharu. We'll give you a month to figure out what to do with the Haruno girl. After that, you are to begin training Sasuke personally. This is what the council has decided, Kakashi. I understand, said Kakashi as the two elders left the room. Kakashi then turned to the two Sannin. Can you let me know when my team wakes up? Tsunade nodded as Kakashi left, out the window, again. Jiraiya pulled out another bottle of sake. You know, you could take on Sakura yourself, said Jiraiya. I've actually thought about it. Kakashi's reports suggested that she would make for a good medical ninja, but there is something else she needs and I'll only train her if she has it, said Tsunade. But there is something else I need to talk to you about. Something came up, regarding Sensei. Tsunade reached into her desk and pulled out a scroll with the Yondime's mark on it. Tsunade told Jiraiya to read it and he did. Hiruzen, I must apologize, but I am writing this in haste. It has come to my attention that Madara Uchiha is still alive and the one responsible for this attack. I believe the best course of action is now to seal the beast inside my newborn son, Naruto. I will be using the seal that I've been working on, which will allow him to eventually utilize the Kyuubi's power as his own so that one day he will be able to end the threat of Madara once and for all. Unfortunately, this will cost me my own life and I do not think Kushina will survive. With neither of us there, we hope that you will find someone who will care for Naruto like we would have. Within the blood seal on this scroll are 2 letters from Kushina and I to Naruto. As a Hokage of the leaf, I understand what you're thinking. I understand that you want to keep my identity a secret from my own son, but I ask you this, let him know who we were. Let him know that we loved him. I do not want my son to be condemned to the fate of wondering where he came from. Trust me, no trust Kushina. She knows best of all what that fate is like and the emptiness that comes with it. He will need all the love he can get to overcome the challenges that he will face. Kushina and I leave everything to him. Please make sure he is seen as the hero he deserves to be seen as. Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage Jiraiya was disgusted at the letter, or rather how the Sandaime handled the letter. Jiraiya knew when Kushina first came to the village, she had been an orphan with no knowledge of her family and Minato saw how she suffered because of that. This was the Yondaime's last will and Sarutobi-sensei had disregarded it, keeping Naruto in the dark about his parents and allowing the village to take numerous shots at killing him. Tsunade, was all the old toad could say. I don't know anymore, Jiraiya. You and I both knew sensei. We both knew he respected Minato too much to simply disregard his final requests, even if it was for the good of the village. At the very least, he could have given Naruto his mother's name as their marriage was kept secret. Or he could have told Naruto to keep this a secret. Naruto trusted the old man, he would have kept it a secret if only sensei asked, said Tsunade. There's just no way the old man could have done this intentionally. There has to be more, there just has to. Tsunade was in disbelief. Instead, Naruto was cast out onto the streets and left to wonder why he was abandoned, a similar fate that Kushina had to face until she met Minato, said Jiraiya, taking a deep breath. I'll tell him, I owe him that much at the very least. Jiraiya, are you sure you want this burden alone? What if something happens, said Tsunade. What if Naruto doesn't take it well? What are you really saying? Are you worried that Naruto may actually decide to go on a rampage through the village? Asked Jiraiya, wondering what it was that Tsunade was actually thinking. No. It's not that. I trust Naruto as much as you do, I just don't trust the village. Ever since that day, I've been worried for Naruto, as worried as I was for Naoki or Dan. Whatever Naruto's reaction, I don't want the villagers to see this as an opportunity to kill the Kyuubi, she said, adding a distinct hint of disgust to the last part. Jiraiya thought for a moment. I need to take another trip here in a few weeks. There is something I need to do regarding the little project Hiyashi gave me. I'll take Naruto with me and tell him then, away from the village. That will also give him enough time to let it sink in and for me to clear a few things up with him. Wait, are you going where I think you're going? Asked Tsunade. Yeah. It'll actually be a perfect trip to tell Naruto on, replied Jiraiya. Naruto woke up, still in the hospital with Hinata snuggling up next to him. His stomach was still killing him. The instant ramen at 3 o'clock in the morning did him no good. He began to work himself out of bed, feeling as energized as ever and made his way over to the window. This woke Hinata, but he assured her that he would be back. He was just going for a little breakfast. Naruto made his way through the village, still dressed in hospital robes. His target was Ichiraku, but he figured he would get something for Hinata. Out! Shouted the baker as Naruto was thrown out of the bakery that he went to get Hinata some breakfast. This landed him right in front of Hanabi, on her way to the academy. Naruto? Asked the younger Hyuga. What are you doing here? I thought you were in the hospital. Hey Hanabi. I am, but I'm just getting breakfast. I can't stand hospital food. I was going to get something for Hinata, but the jerk baker threw me out, said Naruto. Hanabi sighed and went into the backer, coming out with a box of cinnamon rolls and handing them to Naruto. Here, these are Nei-san's favorite. See you later, Naruto, said Hanabi, before running off towards the academy. Well, that worked out better than I thought Naruto. He then made his way to Ichiraku to get their breakfast ramen that he would usually get for, well, breakfast. After collecting the ramen from Teuchi, he made his way back to the hospital. Ramen run successful. Naruto hoped through the window to find Hinata that Hinata had gone back to bed. Naruto opened the box that Hanabi gave him to find 6 rather large cinnamon buns inside. Can she really eat this much? Thought Naruto in a little bit of shock before taking one of the sweets and holding it under her nose. In a comical fashion, Hinata took a whiff of the cinnamony smell of the sweet and instantly snapped awake. Snatching it from Naruto's hand, imagine a starving chipmunk being given a nut. Naruto just stared at her with shrunken pupils as Hinata's attention was finally brought to him, causing her to blush. A warm laugh filled the room after a few moments of awkward silence. Hinata began to eat her way through the cinnamon buns as Naruto enjoyed his ichiraku. Naruto! Shouted a voice on the other side of the door as Naruto had just finished the last of his ramen. Perhaps the ramen run wasn't as successful as he though. That voice was strangely familiar and it caused Naruto to jump and cower behind the bed. Tsunade then burst through the door and began scolding Naruto for his little ramen run before shuffling Hinata out the door so she could give Naruto a full checkup. Despite Naruto passing the checkup with flying colors, minus the violent protests when Tsunade prepared to give him a shot, she still requested that he stay in the hospital one more night. Since he was allowed to move around inside the hospital, Naruto made his way to Sakura's and Sasuke's rooms. Tsunade informed him that Sakura wouldn't be awaking for a few more days and Sasuke was likely going to be out for another week while they healed, but he just had to see with his own eyes that they were still alive. Thankfully, they were. Opening Sakura's door, he found her parents inside. Surprisingly, they didn't shoo him away like most of the other parents would have done. Naruto tried to offer an apology, but they stopped him. Tsunade had told them everything that had happened, at least everything that she knew, and the Harunos came to the conclusion that if it wasn't for Naruto, then Sakura could have likely died. While Sakura's mother had been a civilian all her life, her father was a retired shinobi. He knew the dangers of the life and didn't place any of the blame on Naruto, or his inhabitant. Naruto made his way towards Sasuke's room, but was stopped when he encountered a mob that he hadn't seen since the academy, Sasuke's fangirls. He'd come back later, once the fangirls cleared out. He decided to see if Haku was awake and thankfully he was. Naruto had wanted to know what happened to Haku during that fight and after Haku and Naruto exchanged stories, he was thankful that Haku had managed to take care of Kimimaro. Even with 4v5 instead of 3v4, Kimimaro would have probably made things much harder after Haku described the boy's abilities. Chapter 39. Team 7 No More, Yo! Naruto had returned to his own room to find Jiraiya sitting in the window of his room. Ero Sennin, replied Naruto. Jiraiya sighed, not wanting to be called Ero Sennin but it was probably too late now to change the kid. How are you feeling kid? Asked Jiraiya. Fine, I guess. It's good that Sasuke and Sakura will be alright, said Naruto. See, didn't I tell you Tsunade would make them as good as new? Asked Jiraiya. Good old Bachan, said Naruto, before hearing a crash in the hospital. I mean Hokage-sama, he gulped. Thankfully, there was nothing more that sounded like cracking walls in the hospital. Jiraiya just laughed. Alright, now for the real reason I came here. Huh? Real reason? Asked Naruto. For the next 3 years, your team, Team 7, is no longer active, said Jiraiya. What? Naruto began to protest. What about me? Sasuke. Sakura. Haku. What about the Chunin exams the 3 of us were talking about taking? Calm down, Naruto. Kakashi, Tsunade, and I talked about this and we felt that it would be better for the 3 of you if you all received individual training for the next 3 years, said Jiraiya. From now on, you are officially my apprentice. What? You're really going to be training me personally for 3 years? Asked Naruto, a little excited at the news. But then what about Sasuke, Sakura, and Haku? Well, Haku already receives private training from Zabuza, and Sasuke is going to be trained by Kakashi, as long as we can find a teacher for Sakura, said Jiraiya. Okay, but who will teach Sakura? Asked Naruto. I'm hoping Tsunade, but she won't teach Sakura unless she has something that Tsunade called it, said Jiraiya. Hopefully Sakura will have it, and Tsunade will take her under. Well, whatever it is, I know Sakura has it, said Naruto, now reassured that his team was being looked at. Wait, but before we left on the mission, Kakashi-sensei told us about the upcoming Chunin exams in Kumo. What's going to happen to that? We all wanted to go. Again, we talked it over and we'll let the three of you take one more shot at the Chunin exams before taking the three of you away for a bit, said Jiraiya. Wait, you're going to be taking us away? Asked Naruto. Yep. After the exams, you and I will be going on a journey for a few years. I don't know where Kakashi will be taking Sasuke, and Sakura will most likely be cooped up in the hospital studying, explained Jiraiya. A few years. What? Shouted Naruto. But, what about Hinata? What about the village? Why exactly do we have to do this? Naruto, shouted Jiraiya, trying to get Naruto's attention. Do you remember Itachi and Kisame? Why they were after you? Naruto nodded. They were after Naruto because of the Kyuubi. Good. Now, my informants have told me that they won't be after you for at least 3 to 4 more years. We need to make you really strong so that you'll be ready. Don't worry about Sasuke or Sakura. They will be in good hands. As for Hinata, trust in her. She's strong and I have a feeling she'll really impress you when you return. Naruto suddenly changed to a more determined look. Alright, so when do we get started? Said Naruto. Jiraiya smiled. Like I said, there are a few things that need to be taken care of. We will really begin training you in a few months, but I have enough to keep you occupied until then. Oh, speaking of which, I'm planning on going on another smaller trip here in a few weeks and you're coming with me. I think it's something that will interest you in particular. Then, Jiraiya hopped out of the window onto a rather large toad. I'll be back in a few weeks. Until then, if you need something to do, go ask Asuma Sarutobi to help you with your wind chakra. Naruto was checked out from the hospital the next day. It was still 3 days before the doctors would even think about waking the other 2 members of his team from their medically induced slumber. First thing first, as he was Naruto after all, Ichiraku. I knew I'd find you here. Naruto turned around to a very familiar voice. Iruka-sensei. Iruka joined Naruto at the counter, ordering his own bowl of ramen. I'm sorry to hear about your latest mission, but I'm glad everyone made it back alive, said Iruka. Naruto looked down, remembering the scene of Sasuke getting shot through the chest. Iruka-sensei, I don't ever want that to happen again. I thought Sasuke was dead, I nearly lost it. Iruka took a breath. I know what you're going through, Naruto. I was on a mission where 2 of my comrades died and 1 was in the hospital in critical. It's a part of being a shinobi. You're going to be on missions where friends and comrades get hurt or even die. There is no avoiding it. Just be glad that your friends survived, because not every encounter like that ends with just a trip to the hospital. Yeah, you're right, Iruka-sensei. I just have to get stronger so that I can protect them if something like that ever happens again, said Naruto with resolve. Iruka smiled as Naruto returned to the Naruto he knew. Well, I'm off. I've gotta go train, said Naruto, finishing his bowl. Oh Naruto, hold on a moment, said Iruka, stopping Naruto before he could dart off. Naruto turned to see what his former sensei wanted. I wanted to ask you if you would come in on Monday next week for a show and tell. I want you to come in, show them a few jutsu and maybe tell them about some of your experiences. If that's alright. Naruto smiled. He remembered the days in the academy where former students would come in and show some of the jutsu they learned since graduation. Now Iruka was asking him to come in and show off some of his jutsu. Really? Then I'll be there, I promise. Datbeo. Naruto shouted before running off. That's a special bond you and Naruto have, said Teuchi. Yep. He can get annoying at times, but we are always there for each other. He's like a little brother to me, replied Iruka. Naruto arrived at the Hyuga compound to find Hinata outside sparring with Neji and her father. As such, this distracted her enough that Neji was able to deliver a deciding blow, which was a palm strike that he stopped just before it hit her in the face. Hiyashi sighed and shook his head a little. She was doing well until Naruto showed, who received a glare at that time. Naruto picked up on this. Hehe, sorry Hinata, Hiyashi-sama, apologized Naruto. Well, there is nothing that can be done about it now. So all is forgiven, just be a bit more subtle about arriving next time, replied Hiyashi. Naruto, it is good to see you out of the hospital. How are you? And how are your teammates? Asked Neji. They will be fine after a few more days of recovering, said Naruto. Naruto, I hear sensei is taking you on as an apprentice, asked Hiyashi. Sensei? Oh, you mean Jiraiya. Yeah, he said he was going to train me personally for the next few years, replied Naruto. He then looked at Hinata with a sad look. But he said that we would have to leave for a few years. A few years? Asked Hinata. But that means I won't be able to see you. Naruto hated that Hiyashi brought up that, but like Hiyashi said before, there's nothing that could be done now. Besides, he would have to tell this to Hinata sometime. Well, it sounds like I've still got a few months before we leave anyways, so we'll just have to spend as much time as we can together during then. Ero Sennin even said he'd teach me a way that would allow us to write to each other. Hinata didn't like that Naruto would be away for that long, but she would just have to accept it. Besides, if there's going to be anyone who becomes really strong after, it will be you, said Naruto, causing her to blush a little. Well, she can't become strong if someone keeps interrupting her training, said Hiyashi. Naruto grinned. Sorry, but I actually came to see if Hinata wanted to train. I was just on my way to see if Asuma-sensei would help us with our wind chakra. Hiyashi thought for a moment. Very well, Hinata, you are dismissed for today if you want to train with Naruto and Asuma. This made Hinata a bit happier as she bowed to her father and cousin before leaving. She wasn't going to pass up an opportunity to train with Naruto for a bit. It wasn't long before they found Asuma and his team at their designated training ground. However, there was only Choji and Shikamaru there. Ino was most likely at the hospital, either checking in on Sakura, or with the fangirl mob. Oh, Naruto, called out Choji as he saw the orange-clad genin approach. Asuma and Shikamaru turned their attention to the newcomers. Good to see you out of the hospital, Naruto, said Shikamaru. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear what happened. Anyways, I assume you're here for wind chakra training, said Asuma. Naruto and Hinata looked at him, wondering how he knew. Don't worry, Master Jiraiya told me you'd be seeking my advice out. Asuma gave them a quick rundown on the next exercise, telling them to pull out a normal kunai and channel wind chakra into it, throwing it at a tree. Asuma emphasized by pulling out his own trench knives and sending it through 2 trees in a large rock before burying in the dirt. Everyone there just stared in awe. Naruto then pulled out his own special tri-pronged kunai, causing Asuma to raise an eye. Well, I can already transfer wind chakra into my weapon pretty well, Naruto said, tossing the kunai at another tree, sending it through said tree and embedding itself up to the handle in a rock behind. Out of curiosity, Asuma went for the knife, examining it and asking Naruto where he got it. Ero Sennin, Jiraiya gave it to me. That answer satisfied Asuma. You know this is a very special knife though. What I want you to do is channel your wind chakra into a normal kunai. Asuma did this and sent the normal kunai sailing through 2 trees and into the ground. Naruto did the same, tossing a normal kunai at the tree, and it only embedded itself a few inches into the first tree. Naruto's head dropped and Asuma just laughed. Once you get this training down to the point where you can send a regular kunai clean through a tree or two, then you'll be ready for some of the more advanced wind jutsu. Naruto and Hinata then got to their training, throwing kunai after kunai at the tree. By the end of the day, some progress had been made as they were able to get the kunai to sink into the tree, all the way up to the handle. It wasn't much and it was obvious this exercise would take some time, unlike the previous exercises they had been doing. Hinata left early, being called by Ko to return to the compound for the evening. Naruto had thought about getting some dinner, but there was something else on his mind that he needed to figure out. Naruto found a nice spot beneath a tree and began meditating. Naruto found himself in his own mindscape, standing in front of the large gates that held the Kyuubi inside of him. Wow, you are right. Now that I really think about it, the scenery in here is terrible, commented Naruto. Well, you haven't been trapped in here for the past 12 years, said Kurama. Naruto laughed a little. Anyways, I wanted to thank you for helping Sasuke the other day. And also, I wanted to ask you what that jutsu was that I used, said Naruto, hoping through the bars of the cage and taking a seat on top of Kurama's head. Oh, that. Just a little something called the tailed beast ball, said Kurama. Best technique out there when you just need to mindlessly blow something up. However, regarding that, I suppose I should tell you a little about those chakra cloaks now. So what's up with them? Asked Naruto as he listened in. Well, first there are two types of cloaks. There is the first version which you have when you're using up to 3 tails worth of power, and then there is the second version when you tap into 4 or more tails, explained Kurama. In the first version, you basically use my power to enhance your own attacks, but in the second version you pretty much shelve your own abilities and begin to tap into mine. The more tails you have, the more of my powers you can use. Wow, really? What are the other abilities I can use? Asked Naruto, growing ever more excited. Now what would the fun be if I told you that? Besides, with the way the seal is now, I doubt you're going to be able to use them anytime soon, said Kurama. Wait, why's that? Asked Naruto. Kit, we came awfully close to the seal's limit the other day. If that happens, then I don't know what would happen. 4 tails is the most I can give you for now, and you'll only have a minute or so in the 4-tailed form, explained the Kyuubi. Hold on, do you know what happens if we force the seal too much? Naruto continued to ask questions. I've had a good 12 years to see what we are dealing with, not to mention I'm 1000 years old, so I know a thing or two about seals. Not as much as that pervert teacher of yours, but enough to know what we are dealing with, said Kurama. From what it looks like, if we go too far, some sort of failsafe will activate, cutting the two of us off or something like that. What? Then what do we do? Naruto began to freak a little. Calm down, Kit. You flipping out is not going to solve anything. I think that the super perv knows something about the key. Ask him about it the next time you are alone on the trip he was talking about, advised the fox. Alright, but what if he doesn't have it? Or what if he has it, but won't do anything? Asked Naruto. Well, to be honest, I don't really know. If he doesn't have it, then nothing happens. If he has it, then we can at the very least loosen the seal and let you use a little more of my power safely, or just the opposite happens and he tightens it, said Kurama as there was some silence following that last comment. Now, about doing something about this sewer. Well, any ideas how exactly I can change it? Said Naruto. Kit, it's your mind. Try thinking for once, maybe it will do you some good. Kurama began laughing a little. As Naruto began thinking on a different scenery for his mindscape. There was a large rumbling sound as the floor began to rise, or the water began to recede, and the pipes disappeared. After the rumbling stopped, Naruto collapsed out of exhaustion atop the fox's head. That has been more exhausting than he thought. The general layout was still the same and Kurama was still trapped behind a large gate, but they were now in a large chamber that resembled a large audience chamber of some ancient castle. There was a solid wooden floor with torches lining the side of the room and a raised roof, thankfully with no more leaking pipes. A forest with creatures to hunt would have been preferred, but I guess I can't complain, said Kurama. Sorry, but I think that's about as good as I can do, apologized Naruto. No worries, Kit. This is definitely a lot better than those damp sewers. Now get going, I can still hear rumbling and it's not the floor or ceiling this time, said Kurama, pointing a tail at Naruto's stomach. Naruto laughed and disappeared from his own mindscape to go grab dinner. 7 days had passed since her admittance to the hospital. 7 days, Sakura had been asleep to allow for her body to heal. Today was the day that Tsunade had designated for Sakura to wake. Tsunade administered the counter-agent to Sakura's IV and everyone, Tsunade, doctors, and her parents, waited for the pinkett to wake. Finally, Sakura began to stir, slowly opening her eyes at first, but then they suddenly burst open and she shot straight up. Sasuke! She shouted before being restrained by her parents. Sakura, honey, please calm down. Everything's all right now, said Sakura's mother. Where am I? Panicked Sakura. Honey, you're in the hospital. You got hurt on mission, do you remember? Said Kazashi. Flashbacks of the mission came to Sakura, especially the part with Sasuke standing in front of her with a massive hole through his chest. No, Sasuke. She cried out before actually crying. Sakura, please stop, begged Mebuki. But, Sasuke, he'll be alright, assured Tsunade. Sakura looked at her as she began to calm. It was then that some pain and stiffness came back to her body. But I suggest you just take it easy and relax. You still need to let your body recover. Sasuke asked Sakura. But I saw the arrow rip through his chest. He's a few rooms down from you. It was close, but thankfully the arrow just missed his heart by a few millimeters, said Tsunade, calming Sakura. He's still asleep. I can let you go see him later if you want, but you've got to promise me that you'll take it easy and not freak out like this again. Okay. Okay. Oh, what happened to Naruto and Haku? Asked Sakura, now concerned for the rest of her team. They'll be fine. Their injuries weren't as severe and they were discharged a few days ago, said Tsunade. But how were those sound guys defeated? Asked Sakura. We can talk about that later in private. Just know that help came just in time, said Tsunade. Sakura looked into Tsunade's eyes and figured that something must have happened with Naruto that she couldn't discuss right now, which meant it was something to do with the Kyuubi. If that was the case, that would be the third time the Kyuubi had saved her and Sasuke. Any bits of doubts were slowly working their way out of her head. A few hours later, after the doctors were able to give Sakura a thorough examination and a few other treatments, Sakura was wheeled out towards Sasuke's room to see him as promised. She let out a slight sigh of relief seeing Sasuke alive and knowing that he would eventually be alright. However, this visit brought other thoughts to her head. As she was taken back to her room, she was left thinking. What made it worse was when Tsunade came into the room to debrief her on the events that happened after she lost consciousness. Once again, Sasuke and Naruto had done all the work. They had worked together to actually bring one of those monsters down, and if it wasn't for her, they certainly would have killed the other three. She was simply a target, a distraction, a hindrance to the two. Sasuke was nearly killed trying to protect her while all she could do was sit there and scream. She had to face the facts, she was simply weak. Then it caught her eye, the book on medical ninjutsu that Kakashi had given her prior to the mission. If she knew more, she could have been the one to save Sasuke. In fact, she probably could have healed herself to the point where she could either get away and not drag her team down or even help them. The next day, it was decided that Sasuke could be woken. His awakening was much more subtle than Sakura's, as all he did was ask where he was and what happened. He was then given a few hours to just rest as Tsunade tried to dispel the mob of fan girls. Damn it, I still wasn't strong enough, thought Sasuke. Sure, he and Naruto had managed to kill one of them, but he had still been defeated. What else do I need to do? Interrupting Sasuke's thought was a knock on his door. In stepped his one-eyed teacher. Hey Sasuke, how is everything? Asked Kakashi. Sasuke kind of just shrugged off the comment, giving Kakashi the answer he needed. Sasuke, whatever happened, you can't go blaming yourself. Sasuke. Just stop already. I nearly lost them. It was my fault they were nearly killed. Those freaks came after me and me alone. If I had, said Sasuke, as he actually began to shed a few tears. If you had what? Just given up. If you had just gone with them quietly, asked Kakashi, finishing Sasuke's sentence. What would you do? What would you do if the lives of those closest to you were taken away? Shouted Sasuke. Kakashi took a deep breath as painful memories came to him. Sadly, I know the answer to that question better than you may think. I'm glad that you've come to think of your teammates as being close to you, and believe me, I know what you're going through. Like you, I grew very close to my teammates, I even fell in love with one of them, and then they were taken from me. Sasuke was shocked at this as he looked down. Kakashi, I'm sorry, apologized Sasuke for bringing up the painful memories. It's alright Sasuke. I know where you're coming from. I know you're confused. Just be grateful that they are still alive. Just know that I'm here for you now, and so are the rest of your team, if there's anything you need, said Kakashi. Sasuke let out a slight smile, if that's what you want to call it. But then his mind focused on what it had been thinking beforehand. Kakashi-sensei, I need to become stronger. I need to make sure something like that never happens again, said Sasuke. My family was taken away once before. I can't let him or anyone else take them away again. Good, he's changing from an Avenger to a Guardian, thought Kakashi, glad Sasuke's reason for seeking power was finally beginning to change. He then sighed for the conversation that was coming. Sasuke, I would be lying if I said you never had to worry about something like that ever again. You know that. Sasuke nodded. You now have a fate that I wouldn't wish on anyone, let alone two of my students. Wait, two of your students? What do you mean by that? Asked Sasuke. By two students, I mean you and Naruto. Sasuke looked at Kakashi curiously. Both of you will be pursued by extremely powerful foes for something you possess, and no matter how hard you try, people close to you will be put in danger. Wait, who is pursuing us? Asked Sasuke. You, well, I already told you a while ago. Orochimaru wants your Sharingan, and I have no doubt that he will come at you again. In fact, I'm sure of it. As for Naruto, a group called Akatsuki will be coming after him, or rather what's in him, said Kakashi. Sasuke knew what Akatsuki would be after, the Kyuubi, the same demon that had actually saved his ass on more than one occasion. And Sasuke, you already know who's in Akatsuki. Itachi, growled Sasuke, clenching his fists. No, I won't let him. Not this time. He won't take my family away from me. Sasuke, I gave you Chidori so that you would have some power to protect them, said Kakashi. If I'm correct, you used it kill one of your attackers that threatened your friends. Yeah, but it still wasn't enough, said Sasuke. Sasuke, Chidori isn't the only thing I know. I can give you more. I can give you everything I have. I can give you everything you will need to protect your comrades, your family, said Kakashi. I'm glad that you've finally begun to change, and I'm happy to say that you are ready for more. What? Are you saying you're going to be training us harder? Asked Sasuke. No. I'm only going to be training you, said Kakashi. An opportunity has presented itself. Orochimaru is too weak to make another move for at least 3 years after what Master Jiraiya did to him. I want to make use of that time and train you to the fullest. But, what about Naruto, Sakura, and Haku? Asked Sasuke. Don't worry about them. Naruto will be receiving the same type of training from Master Jiraiya. Haku has already been training with Zabuza and they seem to work well together. Sakura is a different story. I haven't secured a teacher for her, but if everything works out how we want it to, she will be asking Tsunade to be trained as a medical ninja. She has the potential to become a great one, she just needs to realize it and set her sights on it. Oh, and that reminds me, you should help to push her down that path, said Kakashi, making an upside-down smile with his eye. Sasuke nodded and smiled back. So what is this training going to entail? He asked. Well, it'll be kind of like a combination between the training we did to teach you Chidori and Anbu training. Except instead of only 6 months, which is how long Anbu training lasts, we will have 2.5 to 3 years to teach you everything we can, and I can think of at least 500 jutsu that I know you can learn, and that's just because you don't know how to use the water or earth element yet, said Kakashi. Sasuke, when your brother finished with his 6 months in Anbu training, his skills had increased a great deal. We're going to go through that and much more. We'll make you strong enough so that you can protect your friends to the fullest. Sakura had been spending the past day or so doing some serious thinking. She had heard that Sasuke had woken, but for some reason she didn't want to see him. Naruto had stopped by earlier and the two had a serious talk. Naruto's response to all her questions was simple, but it wasn't. His response was basically to find what she was good at and become the best at it. He had taken a cue from Jiraiya and Kakashi and had suggested medical ninjutsu. She had even picked up an interest in it after reading through the book Kakashi had given her. After everyone's suggestions, she now wanted to learn more. She wanted to become the best medical ninja she could be. But the only question was, who could teach her to become the best medical ninja possible? The answer was simple, the best medic in the world. She had to take a chance to ask Tsunade if she no longer wanted to be a hindrance. Despite being confined to her bed, Sakura got up, fighting the pain in her body. This was something she had to do and she didn't care about stupid hospital regulations. First though, she made her way to Sasuke's room. Thankfully, there weren't any fangirls trying to get in his door. Sakura opened Sasuke's room to find that Naruto was visiting. At least she knew why there were no fangirls, as Naruto had always been a sort of fangirl repellent for Sasuke. Sakura? They both asked, wondering what she was doing out of bed. Naruto, Sasuke, I'm sorry for everything. From now on, I won't be a burden to you any longer, I promise, Sakura said before closing the door, not giving Naruto or Sasuke a chance to reply, and hobbling to find Tsunade. Naruto and Sasuke looked at each other, exchanging glances. Looks like Sakura would be just fine after all. There was a knock on Tsunade's door. Come in, she called out. Sakura stepped through the door. Tsunade was tempted to yell at the girl for leaving the hospital, but stopped herself, hoping Sakura was here for a certain reason. I apologize for leaving the hospital, but I have a request that I must make, said Sakura. What is it, Sakura? Asked Tsunade. Please. Make me your apprentice, she begged. Tsunade looked at Sakura and in her eyes, she saw it. She saw the determination required to drive 1/4 to become a top medical ninja. Tsunade thought for a minute. Sakura Haruno, very well. But, I won't go easy on you. Right, said Sakura. She was trying her very hardest to keep her composure, but inside she was elated. Sakura, said Tsunade as she now glared at her new apprentice. Yes, master, asked Sakura. Get back to bed. Now, shouted Tsunade as Sakura hobbled her way out of the Hokage Tower and back to the hospital. So how'd it go? Asked Naruto, grinning, as he passed Sakura in the hallway on his way out. Now that Naruto had left, sure enough Sasuke's fangirls were beginning to form around his door. He knew, thought Sakura. Damn you Naruto. Playing us like that. When I get out of this hospital, you're going to regret it. Cha! Shouted inner Sakura. At least now she was going to get stronger so that she wouldn't burden her team. She guessed that she could overlook the blonde's actions for that. The following day, after receiving the news from Tsunade, Kakashi assembled Team 7 for one final meeting. Well, I think you all know why you're here, said Kakashi to Sakura, Sasuke, Naruto, and Haku. As of now, Team 7 is being temporarily dissolved. You all have your own teachers that will be handling your training now for a few years. I look forward to working with all of you again when we reform as a team. I have a feeling it won't be a repeat of the first time we came together. Kakashi was referring to the bell test. Sensei, what about the Chunin exams you told us about that will be held in Kumo in a few months? Asked Sakura. Well, that will be up to the three of you. Master Jiraiya, Tsunade-sama, and myself have talked with one another and we will allow you one more chance at a promotion before your true training begins. Of course, you'll still be trained. But if you chose to take the exams, you will all need to take a few weeks worth of break from your training. There was no discussion between the three genin of Team 7. We'll go, Datbeo. Besides it will give us a good measure of our skill before we leave, said Naruto. Sasuke and Sakura nodded with Naruto's declaration as Haku smiled. Wait, what about Haku? Asked Naruto. Your concern is reassuring Naruto, but you don't have to worry about me, said Haku. Zabuza-sama and I have our own plans that we want to take care of. Don't tell anyone, but those two are looking to become hunter nins of our village, said Kakashi. Of course, Zabuza still has a few months left on his probation, so they can't try to become hunter nins until that is up and the Hokage deems him loyal enough to the village. That's great Haku. Just don't forget to destroy Zabuza's body the next time you kill him, joked Naruto. Well, this will be it for now. I will bring you all together in a few months just before exams so you can get a feel for your new skills. But until then, I won't be seeing you, except for Sasuke that is, said Kakashi, shooting an almost Enko-like glare towards Sasuke and earning a gulp in return. I've actually enjoyed my time as your sensei and I look forward to seeing the progress the four of you make after your training. Goodbye for now, sensei, thought Sakura and Naruto as Kakashi shunshined away. Team 7 was no longer Team 7, at least not for a few years, and the Chunin exams.